Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And once again, we are picking up on this ever-evolving but still mysterious story that goes back to September 19th of last year, where Sheriff Mickey Steins in Letcher County, Kentucky, shot and killed Judge Kevin Mullins, for whom he was a bailiff for prior to becoming sheriff. Now, the single question still remains: why? There have been so many rumors, so much hearsay, but since the last time we covered this, we have talked to several anonymous sources. People have come forward, some that we have reached out to, and a clear picture now is starting to emerge about what happened on that fateful day in Letcher County, Kentucky. And we're going to get into all that right now. My Wi-Fi was acting up yesterday. You guys hearing me okay, Elizabeth and Mark? You got me? Okay. So we are joined today by Hillbilly Crime, otherwise known as Elizabeth Jones, who has this channel, and she's been following this case very, very closely, and she's going to let us know what's new, and I'm going to bounce some things off of her. And then we've got General Mark Davidson, who is an active DA out of the great state of Tennessee, covers 5 rural counties in Tennessee, so he knows a thing or two about smaller jurisdictions, and he's going to give us his expert advice as an active prosecutor. Last but not least, we're expecting John Tompkins, who's a criminal defense attorney out of Indianapolis. We met him during the Delphi case, and he is supposed to be here. He does a lot of work in smaller jurisdictions, and he's going to give us his perspective as well. So what we know so far, for sure, that Sheriff Mickey Steins has been charged with 1 count of murder of a public official. That, of course, is Judge Kevin Mullins, because he is a government official. This is potentially a death penalty eligible case. As I said earlier, Sheriff Steins was Judge Mullins' bailiff for 10 years. He's currently being held at the Leslie County Detention Center. To you, by the way, I got some hate mail saying that I should not refer to you as Hillbilly, but I kind of like it. If you want 2 names and or Elizabeth, you tell me. But I asked you last time, and they said it was disrespectful. However, I don't think it is, because I asked you. And I think we get along. So, Elizabeth, let's start there. First of all, he's being held at the Leslie County Detention Center, which is a different county, obviously. It's about an hour away. Do we know why there and why not in Letcher County at this point?
I think it's probably just for safety reasons and conflict of interest, probably. It's about an hour, a little bit less than that. I'm not exactly sure why they chose Leslie County, to be honest with you.
Interesting. How about you, General Mark? Is this typical in rural Tennessee, if someone commits a crime in one county, to hold them in another county because maybe there's too much talking going on? Or
yeah, you typically would not hold a sheriff in his own jail. I mean, I know he's resigned the position, but at the time of the event, had he been put in that jail, these would have been people he's hired who were incarcerating him. He would be very close to the jail administrator, if not consider him to be a right-hand person. So, there's safety issues there. There's potential issues with him getting favors, or maybe things happening that shouldn't be. So it's just easier and makes more sense to hold him in a different jail.
So there was a hearing this past Friday. It was supposed to be live on Zoom. Never happened live on Zoom. A lot of people had a hard time tracking it down, but the Zoom eventually did appear. And to get us all caught up to date, there's a news story from the great state of Kentucky. I'm going to play it for us now to watch it together, and then we're going to go through some of the more new and interesting developments that we are starting to find out about. And as I said, a clearer picture is starting to emerge, and I'll give you this spoiler alert. It is not a pretty picture. Here we go.
After being arraigned in the Letcher County Courthouse, former Letcher County Sheriff Mickey Steins appeared before a judge Friday morning. The judge in the case made this recommendation.
We go ahead and get the order entered in regards to competency and criminal responsibility.
That order would go through the Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center. Steins, being held in the Leslie County Detention Center, was indicted by a Letcher County grand jury on one count of murdering a public official. His attorney, Jeremy Bartley, specifically addressed the issue of criminal responsibility.
Our expert should be able to participate in the proceedings at KCPC.
Commonwealth's attorney Jackie Steele took issue with Bartley's request.
I'm not comfortable doing a criminal responsibility if he's going to have an expert on that position unless we know what the issues are they're raising in the criminal responsibility with our expert.
While Steele feels comfortable getting the criminal responsibility order in, he wants the process to play out with these conditions.
Their expert, if they've already conferred with him, he's already done an examination, needs to get that report in before the KCPC responsibility issue is done.
The judge said he'll move ahead with the competency and criminal responsibility orders, addressing the timing of the reports, who's present and when, at a later date. As for the issue of bond, no bond was set for Steins at his arraignment in November. Friday, Bartley asked the judge to take the matter of bond under advisement.
In whatever form the court would like for us to raise that issue.
The judge told him to set a time for a formal motion on bond. No date has been set to address that, but the judge says that hearing will take place in person.
There you go. That is Lex 18 in Kentucky. Having some storms here again, so I apologize. Go in and out a tiny bit here. Hopefully it will not be a problem today. General Mark, to you on this, the KCPC is a term we're hearing now more of, and we heard about it on Friday. This is, and I'm just referring to my notes here, the Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center. So it's going through, the correctional department. Walk us through this. So they're going to have to do a competency hearing. What's the turnaround time? The other big issue, as you just heard, that came up, he's being held without bond. But first, to the competency hearing and the defense, special defense expert here. Tell us this process, how this moves forward.
So the defense has not only requested a mental evaluation and there are two different issues. Competency and what they're calling responsibility. I typically in Tennessee, we're referring to insanity at the time of the offense. So competency is to determine whether or not you are competent to stand trial currently. Do you know who the judge is? Are you able to assist your defense lawyer? Do you know who the prosecutor is? Do you understand the charges against you? And I think the defense really wasn't asking for that mental evaluation. The judge decided to go on ahead and do that. They're really asking for an evaluation on responsibility or sanity at the time of the offense. Now, that's different. That's simply, do you know right from wrong at the time you committed the crime? Or did you suffer from some mental disease or defect or diminished capacity due to emotional distress? So it looks to me like the defense was asking to go straight to the responsibility at the time of the crime part of it. The judge decided to go on ahead and also have him evaluated for competency now to stand trial. So they're two different evaluations. The back and forth between the attorneys, it's kind of, you can see the beginnings of what we call the battle of the experts. The defense clearly thinks that KCPC evaluators are agents of the state and belong to the prosecution and will be considered to be prosecution experts. So what you heard from defense counsel was that they apparently have already gone ahead and retained their own mental health expert to do an evaluation. And when the prosecutor heard that, his response was, well, they need to go on ahead and do their evaluation and produce a report so that then our expert can review that report and do their own evaluation. And so that's what the prosecutor was asking for. The defense wanted the opposite. They wanted to have the evaluation done at KCPC and then let their expert review that and respond. So you kind of have a back and forth over who's going to have to go first. It sounds like the judge said, we're going to go on ahead and do the evaluations at KCPC for both competency and responsibility. So that's where it's headed. And a time frame, I would think 30 to 90 days, probably somewhere in there. They ought to be able to get that done.
All right. So you're hearing 30 to 90 days on the competency here. And there's a question here, General, back to you. Why would the judge want the bond hearing in person? Other stuff has been on Zoom. Why specifically that in person?
If I'm defense counsel, I want the bond hearing in person. So, Zoom hearings are just not the best. And you're talking about whether or not the defendant will be given a bond and have an opportunity to bail out. And the judge may want to hear from him, and this judge may decide I need to see people in person to really judge credibility. When I hear from witnesses, he's anticipating he's going to hear some proof, some testimony or proof of some sort. So I understand the judge would want to do that in person so he can weigh the credibility of whatever witnesses are called.
Now you're obviously seeing a picture of Sheriff Dines there from the Friday hearing. This is a Zoom with the husband and wife defense team, and then Kevin Mullins on the right. This, just to bring everyone up to date for those who are new to the story, this is probably one of the crazier stories that I've covered in recent years. That is the sheriff in the plain clothes, notably not in his uniform, pointing a weapon, which he then fired 8 rounds into Judge Kevin Mullins. He's actually kind of smiling. That is the last moment of his life right there. And then obviously you see the response to the shooting in Whitesburg, Kentucky there, bottom left. So a lot to unpack. We're going to go through this step by step today, and there's some interesting developments for sure. But Elizabeth, Hillbilly Crime, to you, anything new that you've uncovered that you're willing to share before we get back? I want to get back to this hearing after that, and then we'll get to some other important information.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing that they had in the newspaper that I did not hear in the hearing was the discovery that they have. I did hear in the hearing that they, as far as the way that I understood it, they've already turned over all of the discovery. But in the paper, it said that the prosecutors have turned over more than 2,400 pages of evidence, 329 audio files, 234 video files, and 11 photographs to the defense, as well as transcripts of the grand jury testimony, computer hard drive, and several spreadsheets.
General, that's obviously your wheelhouse. Is that a lot of evidence? Typical, discovery, a lot of discovery, average, where do you put it?
That's a pretty fair amount of discovery. It sounds about right for a case of this gravity. Yeah.
So just going back, and again, I apologize because my iPad is not working, so I'm going off the phone here with my notes. But the defense arguments, Jeremy Bartley is the defense attorney along with his wife. They want this defense expert to be able to testify in court on his behalf after, or at least during the process of this psychiatric evaluation. General Mark, if you had a guess, obviously it's their own expert. Is this going to play to some sort of defense that he had some sort of breakdown, nervous breakdown, something along those lines, and just snapped in that moment?
That's what I would expect. Yes. And the fact that they went straight to that very quickly, they're still in the discovery phase, and they've already gotten a mental health expert and are asking for an evaluation specifically for responsibility. So they don't appear to have any concerns that the sheriff doesn't understand the proceedings against him. they're going straight to what was his mental state at the time of the offense. And I would expect that they have intentionally hired an expert that they think will be favorable, or has in the past produced evaluations that are deemed to be favorable towards defendants. And, sometimes you see kind of this cottage industry of mental health experts getting involved in homicide cases, death penalty cases. They can charge for their evaluations, their courtroom testimony, the time they spend looking into the case. So there's typically in every state, you're going to have a group of these mental health experts. Some are viewed to be more favorable to the prosecution. Some may be more so for the defense. So there's some of that going on. I hadn't heard who the expert is yet.
By the way, if anyone is out there who is from this area of Kentucky and you want to speak anonymously, again, speaking to several people just today, as recently as today. So and there is John Tompkins, criminal defense attorney out of great state of Indiana, who's done work. Welcome, John. There's a little bit of ambient noise coming on your end, John, so I'm going to have you keep yourself muted unless you're talking, if that's okay. But if anyone is out there from this area of Kentucky who wants to speak to us, anonymously or on the record, whatever your choice is, you can email us survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. Again, this is one of the more interesting stories that I have covered in recent years. General Mark, back to you. The Commonwealth's attorney raised concerns about the defense's approach. They want the defense expert to submit a report before the KCPC proceeds with the evaluation. They want clarity on the issues they're saying being raised by the defense. Is this a standard operating procedure? What is really going on? I mean, obviously this is lawyering, probably 101, but what's happening here, behind the scenes?
Yeah, the Commonwealth here is doing pretty much what we would do if the defense comes into court and says, Judge, we need to get an evaluation done. We've already hired an expert. If I'm the prosecutor for the Commonwealth, I'm going to ask the judge to have them go on ahead and do their evaluation, produce their expert report, which they're required to turn over to the prosecution. If you have an expert who produces an expert report, you have to turn that over to the state so they can review it and possibly have their own expert do their own evaluation. So the state is asking that the defense take the first bite at this apple, go on ahead and get their report done. Then the prosecution can review it and talk about getting their own expert if they feel they need to. So, each side kind of wants the other one to go first.
And Hillbilly Crime, this question was up here. Has there been or was there a substance screening, I presume, for Sheriff Mickey Steins within the 30 days? Do we happen to know that, if he was tested, any kind of toxicology report, anything along those lines?
Well, I don't know if they went and did it later, but the night that this happened, me and a girlfriend of mine went down there to the courthouse, and we saw the former jailer outside, and we spoke to him, and I asked that very question: are they taking him for a tox screen? And he said no, that they were taking him straight to the jail. So they did not take him to the hospital after this happened. I don't know if they did it later or not, but that day it didn't happen.
John, welcome to the show. Good to have you back here on Surviving the Survivor. Just so you know, you're here joined by General Mark Davidson, who's an acting DA out of Tennessee, rural Tennessee. And then you've got Elizabeth Jones, who runs Hillbilly Crime, the YouTube channel. She's been on this story. But the latest news, and then we're going to get into some developments that I've learned from sources who are close to this, multiple sources that have reached out or I've been in touch with as recently as today. But the issue at hand on Friday, John, was the KCPC, which is a Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center. Basically, they're going to run an evaluation. The defense said that they want their expert witness involved in this. The state says not so fast. You need to submit a report as to why. The judge order to proceed with the competency and criminal responsibility orders, but deferred decisions on the timing and participation to a later date. So what is your take on all this? This is obviously the beginning steps where they want to see what was going on or what is going on with this sheriff. Why did he seemingly have some sort of meltdown and just shoot and kill this judge?
Well, I think I'll echo some of what the general had to say. It is normal for both sides to disclose experts. Now, the order, it deals with really two issues: competency, which is generally considered, are you okay now? Can you participate in the process? Do you understand how it works? Can you assist in your defense? And culpability or responsibility for the crime. So at the time of the crime, were you aware of the wrongfulness of your acts? So there appear to be two different questions. In terms of the prosecutor, I won't say for sure opposing the defense expert, but wanting the defense expert qualified. I think that's a fair question. Who do you want to send in here? What are their qualifications? If they are going to be assessing the evaluation or observing it versus doing it themselves, that's a fair question. Trying to prevent the defense from having their own set of eyes and ears to observe that protocol and process and whether it is administered correctly is another matter. They should be open to having someone from the defense present. I think it's fair to say we want somebody who's qualified present.
There you go. Someone who's qualified. That makes a whole lot of sense. But Hillbilly Crime, Elizabeth Jones, to you, what's the mood in Letcher County? I got to tell you, the people that I talk to sort of echo some of the same sentiments, that it is definitely, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, small town America. There's a lot of fearfulness, a lot of trepidation about speaking because of possible repercussions and or threats. So I guess what's the mood like, since the last time we talked in Letcher County? Are you feeling comfortable being able to report on this? Are you personally worried?
Well, I think it would be careless to say that, that you're not worried. Retaliation is a serious concern. I'm not too concerned for myself. I don't drink. I don't drink and drive. So I'm not out running around the roads. I'm not out, committing risky behaviors, for them to then come after me, and none of them own my home. They don't employ me. So I have a little bit more ability to speak, whereas a whole lot of other people who would like to speak on this subject, but they might be on probation or, have some kind of situation like that keeps them, pretty fearful of speaking out.
Mark, what about this? I mean, we're getting to the issue of bond. So again, they want a separate bond hearing. Brosmith here saying, who thinks that this new judge is going to give bond to a defendant for killing a judge? Good question. I mean, it's, obviously they have the same occupation, this judge and the other judge. Is he going to be particularly protective or is he going to be judicious? What are the chances here of bond?
I would think pretty low. That this is a homicide. This is not a whodunit. We know who committed this crime. There's a video evidence that everybody's seen. It's pretty shocking. It appears to be deliberate and calculated. So I would think the judge would consider the sheriff to be a danger to himself or others, public safety risk, probably. Not so sure about what the proof might be on whether or not he's a flight risk. But I would think the judge would be disinclined. And you also have the fact that a previous judge already considered bond, ordered him held without bond. That's an issue. I think the judge would probably be looking for, what has changed since that last hearing, what circumstances changed that would make him more eligible for bond today than he was then. And then you also have the factor of the possibility that this could be a capital case, which in Tennessee, You can be held without any bond at all if it's a capital case. So the possibility of that probably also weighs against him getting a bond.
Yeah. General, I'm going to come back to you on this one because this is sort of in your wheelhouse here. I was born in Southeast Kentucky. I bet the sheriff is counting on his longtime standing as a good old boy. You always hear about that, not just in rural areas, but, I worked in TV news, and there was a good old boy network amongst the executives for a very long time. But is this true, in your part of Tennessee, in this part of Kentucky, that there is this good old boy network where they watch out for each other's, take each other's back?
Well, it's a rural county, and the sheriff of a rural county, it's pretty common that they know just about everybody. So trying the case in Letcher County, I don't know if there's going to be a motion to change venue filed or not, or if there has been. I would expect one, frankly, given how rural this county is and how much publicity this case has generated. But the question on a good old boy network, I think really in terms of these proceedings, what the concern might be is that you're going to get somebody or maybe several people on the jury who know the sheriff or know somebody that knows the sheriff and don't really disclose what type of relationship that is, and they can shoot for jury nullification and just call this a killing that for whatever reason it was so bad and such bad actions on the part of the judge. I do expect them to put the judge on trial and try to get somebody just to say, I'm not going to find him guilty. So I think that's kind of what that question is going at. And there is some risk in a really rural county that everybody knows everybody. So I would not be surprised to see an effort to get this case moved out of Letcher County.
Yeah, and it seems like it might be heading that way. John, to you in Indianapolis, the defense already sort of indicated that they're going to use some sort of emotional disturbance defense, that something was bothering him. First of all, I mean, how is that different, I guess, than an insanity defense? And is that their best option in your view?
Well, the difference between an insanity defense and what I'm going to call maybe a heat of passion defense is an insanity defense is a defense of innocence. He shouldn't be held responsible because he didn't appreciate the wrongfulness of his act. A heat of passion defense is a defense of culpability. This was not a knowing and intentional killing. It was done in the heat of passion or when someone was so overwhelmed by emotion or fear that they were not in full control of themselves. So that would lower, in Indiana, it would lower a charge for murder to voluntary manslaughter, for instance. Voluntary manslaughter has a much lower penalty range, but it is not a not guilty. Now you can try to swing for a home run there and say, well, the state charged this as a murder. You can't convict him of any other crime. We've shown you it wasn't murder, it was voluntary manslaughter, so you have no choice but to acquit because the state overreached here. That's a risky defense. A lot of defense attorneys would go for the middle ground, say, look, we're going to ask for that lesser. We're going to ask the jury to be allowed to convict of the lesser and try to just get off the murder. But that's the difference between a culpability defense, heat of passion. Again, that's the Indiana term, and an insanity. Didn't understand the wrongfulness of the act.
Yeah, and by the way, and what about this, Elizabeth? The sources I'm talking to are telling me this was not heat of passion crime, that this was something that had been brewing, that's something that had been bothering Sheriff Steins, and he took things into his own hands. Are you hearing the same thing in terms of it not being heat of passion here? Also, there was a person here, I think it was Linda Mon, who wanted to know, sort of what the latest talk is at the water cooler in Letcher County. But first to the point, that I was just asking about.
Well, the greasy spoon.
Yeah.
I had to look that up. I didn't know what that meant. I think that it really is looking like the mental health aspect. So a couple of things that I've been able to track down is that apparently it was true that he was not living at home like before this happened. I don't know how long he had been gone, but I think it was more than just the one night.
By the way, if I can jump in there, I heard that he was not at home for at least 5 nights, and that things were kind of not going well in the marriage. But continue on.
Oh, I heard more like 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks he had been gone. But regardless, he and remind me again, Joel, what was your first question? I'm sorry.
What was my first question? I don't know. We'll come back to it. I have short-term memory loss, but here's another one from Violet. To you, Elizabeth, what's the mood amongst the Letcher County Sheriff's deputies? That's an interesting question. Have you seen them out and about? Are they supporting Mickey Steins? Are they running from him? Do you get a sense of that?
Well, I think that, everybody was friends. I have spoken to someone that's kind of in that circle quite a bit lately. And, they said, Mickey was my friend. I watched him grow up. The judge was my friend. I've never seen him do anything like what they're accusing him of. So, it looks like the people, the officials that are in that circle, nobody's talking. Everybody's being quiet. Nobody's saying a word openly. I think everybody's kind of just waiting on the trial to see what happens.
Here's a person saying that they're from Kentucky and basically it's all about the money. They're all corrupt. I'm starting to get a sense that maybe they're there you go. The corruption runs as deep as the coal mines. To you, John, I mean, I know that's not your area of expertise, but what would you say to a client or comes in and says, I'm afraid to come forward because everyone in this small town's corrupt? What can you do about something like this?
Well, there are 2 avenues that you can pursue. One, you can go to a state bureau of investigation. So in Indiana, it's the Indiana State Police. You get out of the local county and you get to a general jurisdiction. You get to people who aren't from that county. You also have the option of going potentially to a U.S. Attorney's Office or to the FBI and seeking an independent investigation through those means. But if you, as the attorney, have some of those same concerns about the local authorities, then you just go to an arguably neutral law enforcement agency to get that information, if it's critical information to the investigation, to the right people so they can act on it.
Yeah. John, I'm just going to ask you to...
You can also, I'm sorry to interrupt, you can also, as an attorney, go forward to the authorities. So if you trust the local authorities, but you understand your client's fear, you can go and say, the identity of my client's privileged. I cannot tell you who's telling me this, but here's some important information, or here's an important piece of evidence that was turned over to me, and then turn that over to the police that way.
There you go. So if you're listening, you can go to your attorney and ask your attorney to do it on your behalf. John, I'm just going to have you keep muting when you're not on, just because it's a bit of an audio gurgle. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to comment on this too. A lot of people just don't have the trust in any of the agencies. In Hazard, Perry County, it's about 30 miles from us. It's a neighboring county. A while back, the FBI came in and conducted an investigation on the Commonwealth attorney for Perry County. He was apparently addicted to methamphetamine himself. He was coercing and threatening the people that he was supposed to be prosecuting. He was also sexually abusing and coercing men that he was supposed to be prosecuting. He ended up being charged with honest services fraud. He didn't get charged with the sexual abuse. He didn't get charged, which is basically the big R word, what he was doing. Mm-hmm. He didn't get charged with making these people bring him drugs and give them to him. And then he was also making these people let him perform sex acts on them or vice versa. And all he was charged with was honest services fraud, and he got 4.5 years. And that was through the FBI. So we can understand why the people in this area, feel like they don't have anywhere to turn and they don't have anywhere to go, because I can guarantee you several people have already contacted those agencies and nothing gets done. They don't believe you.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's come from someone that lives there. By the way, Elizabeth talked about this last time. She, at one point, like many people, sadly, in this part of the country, had an addiction. I believe, was it opioids?
Yep.
Elizabeth? Yeah, and was able to get herself completely clean. So kudos to her, but not everyone there is as lucky as her. And that leads to this question, where the deputies involved in putting pressure on the victims. We're going to get to that because there's a part in one of the lawsuits that reveals some of this. One victim passed. That's Jennifer Hill. Do we know how? I'm being told it was a drug overdose. But it's interesting because she may have held the keys to some answers. Anything about that, Elizabeth, and any more information, or is it still determined to be a drug overdose?
Well, I think that's very concerning myself, because we see so much in the world today how foul play can be involved in something like that. And as far as we know, it's just been considered an overdose, and that's the end of it. I think that there should be some investigation into that myself.
Yeah, and maybe there will be as a result of this story. But COE, to you, can we pull up the sheriff's behavior leading up to the shooting? Okay, so this is some more information about Sean Mickey Steins the day before the shooting. Unusual behavior, acting erratic. He told the Mountain Eagle Reporter, which is a paper of record in Letcher County, that he lost 40 pounds in 2 weeks, deleted all his social media, his official Facebook page, told others he was nervous his social media pages would be used against him. John, I know you're not a psychologist, but you're a criminal defense attorney, and it looks like this guy was experiencing some level of paranoia, or at least fear. How do you interpret this?
Well, I think he's on a path to losing it. It would appear, whether he's delusional and imagining these things, or this might be the good old boys working in reverse. In other words, he was in the good old boys, and now all of a sudden he's worried he's on the outs and he needs to protect himself, and he's worried about that network turning against him. And then why would he be worried about that? I mean, this is something that the defense, I'm sure, is investigating, and they have access to him directly, so they can ask him questions and get answers to get to the bottom of that before anyone, probably.
Yeah, and Mark, on the flip side, since you're the prosecutor in rural Tennessee for 5 counties, what about the flip side of that? What's the state, what's the government doing here to try to find out what was going on with this sheriff in the days leading up to this murder that was all captured on camera?
Yeah, when you look at the video and you look at the timeline kind of leading up to the shooting, where they're going out to lunch together, it's clear that the sheriff, that is under some stress. I think the state's theory might be that he had already developed the intent to kill the judge. That was weighing on him, whatever the motive ends up being. We'll learn more about that at trial. But that these are symptoms of the process he's going through, is because he's a sheriff, he's a chief law enforcement officer in the county. He's supposed to be doing the right thing. And it seems pretty clear that this was a planned, premeditated, calculated killing. And if I'm the prosecution, I'm probably going to argue that there's some evidence here in his activity or behavior the days before that indicates that this is all going through his head.
Yeah, it appears he is melting down. But again, I got to tell you, the people I've spoken to say that this was actually a long time coming, and that it was likely very deliberate and not a heat of the moment sort of heat and the heat of passion moment. You got on this picture on the right here, you see him even crouching down. But someone talking about the smoking, this is something that comes up on the shows. In his right hand, you do see a cigarette, and sources I talk to say they're still smoking to this day, even though it is illegal. I guess another point about small town courthouses work, I guess, the way they want to work. John, to you, criminal defense attorney, this is your client, and here is photos. We're not playing the video. There is video, but we've chosen not to play it here because it's pretty triggering. I saw someone mention there's no blood. At this, no blood that we can see. I'm sure that there was plenty of blood around here. But John, this is your client, hypothetically. These images are really hard to overcome. This guy calls you. What are you? How are you proceeding forward?
Well, I'll start just, I'll mention your comment on the blood. So, and it's just some nuts and bolts about homicides. When you're dead, your heart stops beating and you stop bleeding. So if you're hit in the heart with a bullet, there's not going to be a whole lot of blood at that crime scene. I would say on this, I mean, I see that bottom middle picture and there's not a gun drawn. It's not unusual for a sheriff to carry a firearm. So whereas a civilian in a courthouse with a gun might indicate he entered with the intent to use that gun, that you can't draw that same inference from a law enforcement officer entering with a gun. So we don't know, just because he had a gun, that he walked into even that office intending to use the gun. And then he doesn't walk in apparently with the gun drawn. Don't make the mistake of assuming that heat of passion means instantaneous ignition. It can be a slow boil that boils over. So the confrontation that started with him entering the office may not have been a deadly confrontation, but it may have become deadly. That's when the heat of passion, you really have to hone in with your client on as much as you can about the details that he remembers. Why did he go there? Did he tell anyone why he was going there? Had he sent any communications to the judge and said, I just want to get this ironed out? Imagine if the digital that they pull on him says, hey, judge, I want to come in, bury the hatchet, make sure everything's okay. Well, that swings this whole case in a heartbeat, because then what happened? What was the judge's reaction that caused this extreme activity and a homicide? A homicide. We don't know if it's a murder yet. I'm being nitpicky about the words, but I'm a defense attorney. It's clearly a homicide. Is it voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, murder? We just don't know yet. And that's where I want to go with these pictures, because again, we have a picture up there right now where he doesn't have his firearm drawn. What caused him to draw the firearm? He did not walk in there with it drawn. We can't assume he walked in there to use it.
That's interesting, and I did not know that. So heat of passion doesn't mean in that instant, but it could be leading up to it. Here's another graphic, and this is going to be the part of the show where there's going to be some newer, probably more interesting information to the public writ large, as they say. So here, the day of the shooting, what we know happened. Judge Mullins and Sheriff Steins had lunch together with a handful of people. And by the way, sources telling me that it was not a very jovial lunch, like they were not getting along, as some prior reports have indicated. Sheriff Steins goes to the judge's chamber. 2:55 p.m. on September 19th, police respond to shots fired. 5 minutes later, Sheriff Mickey Steins is arrested. Detective Clayton Stamper testified that he was told Sheriff Steins called his daughter on his phone, then on Judge Kevin Mullins' phone prior to the shooting. Stamper said Steins' daughter's phone number was stored on Mullins' phone. This is interesting because some of the sources that I've talked to basically say they don't think that the sheriff's daughter is really a big part of this story, but you keep hearing this coming up, and the innuendo, the implication is that maybe there was some kind of illicit relationship going on between Judge Kevin Mullins and the daughter. So Hillbilly Crime, this is you. Anything, I know you're interested in this too. Anything further on this about, why he may have called his daughter from Judge Mullins' phone? Anything about the daughter at all that the public should know?
To me, I think that it's a red herring. I don't think that that there was any relationship between the judge and Mickey's daughter. They have come out pretty soon right after this happened and said that that was not true. Like, that rumor just took off like wildfire. And I think it was just because of that phone call. But, to me, it might even go to the premeditation of it. Was he calling her to talk to her one last time before this happened?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So why? I mean, it seems kind of weird to just call your daughter and say, "Hey, I'm about to be arrested for murder." I mean, you think that could have been it?
I don't know.
She does not know. Okay, so Mickey Steins, former sheriff, he's then forced to resign. Judge Mullins' bailiff. He was Judge Mullins' bailiff for a very long time. 2018, he's first elected as sheriff. 2019, he is sued by former Letcher County deputy for retaliation for campaigning against him. 2022, a lawsuit filed alleging a Letcher County deputy sheriff offered "quote unquote" favorable treatment for sexual favors. Steins was listed as a defendant for allegedly failing to properly train the deputy sheriff, now facing murder charges. That deputy was convicted, but again, Elizabeth, he didn't spend too much time behind bars. Just refresh us on that part of the story. He was convicted again for having forcible sex with a woman in the judge's chamber.
Yeah, there was a civil suit filed by Ned Pillersdorf, and on behalf of two of his victims. That civil suit is what brought them to start the criminal investigation into Ben Fields. Well, then one of the women overdosed and died, so she went away from the criminal prosecution. He took a plea bargain only on the one victim. He got 6 years, 7 years. I think it was 7 total. He only had to serve 6 months in jail, and they let him serve his 6 months in the Letcher County Jail. And I found out a little bit more detailed information about that. The reason why he was given so many privileges is because they made him a trustee. As soon as he came in to serve his time, they made him a trustee, which gave him special privileges.
Mark, what do you make of that? That he made him a trustee? I never even heard of that. To give this guy some kind of privilege behind bars. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a trustee, trusty, not the trustee of the county. That's still pretty common practice in rural areas where some sheriffs will choose to designate some inmates as trustees or trustworthy enough to be let out to mow the grass or paint the facility or do repairs. And we actually still see some of that in the Department of Corrections at a few facilities. Can be a dangerous practice. And typically that's just up to the sheriff to decide who he thinks would be good to get out of their jail cell and put to some use around the facility. And for the inmate, they get a whole lot more freedom than the other inmates. They're out and about all day. So it's a pretty good gig to get if you're in the jail. And apparently that deputy, as part of that plea bargaining process, somehow managed to get himself housed in Letcher County and then become a trustee, which might have raised a few eyebrows. It seems like it did with Elizabeth.
Well,
Yeah.
after you plead guilty to perjury for swearing out false escape warrants on the women that you are coercively raping, I don't think that makes you much of a trustworthy person in my.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never heard of this trustee, the TRUSTY, but you learn something new every day, and it appears that he was entrusted, and that's again why this deputy who was convicted of this forcible sex inside the judge's chamber was released after it was supposed to be like a 6-year sentence, and it ended up being much shorter. Elizabeth, to you, everyone keeps asking, was there audio? As far as we know, there was no audio on that video of him shooting and killing Judge Kevin Mullins. Is there?
Not that we know of, no. I was told yesterday that camera's been in there for 2 years. It was placed in by the DOJ after Benfield's investigation was concluded. And so Mickey knew that camera was there if it was there for 2 years.
Yeah. Someone's asking if he left his house on his own volition. I think the wife tossed him out of that house. Here's information on Judge Kevin Mullins, obviously 54 years old. For 8 years, he was assistant Commonwealth attorney. 2009, former Governor Steve Beshear, whose son Andy is now the governor, appointed Mullins as a district judge, handled juvenile cases, misdemeanors, traffic offenses, small claims, arraignments, cases involving domestic violence. And you see Sean Mickey Steins was Mullins' bailiff before he became sheriff in 2018. One of the sources explaining that if, and this is important, if Judge Mullins was up to no good, it would have reflected really poorly on the former governor and the current governor, because it was the father who appointed this judge. And so that was is another concern regarding the judge and any kind of potentially damning information that comes out on him. Now, this next part is also really interesting. COE, do you have the ARC full screen? There we go. So now it gets a little complicated. We're going to break it down. So there is, we know, an ongoing FBI investigation into something called addiction recovery care. The acronym is ARC. It is a for-profit company based in Louisa, Kentucky. CEO and affiliates are and big political donors. Over 30 treatment centers in Kentucky. Again, Kentucky has one of the highest, if not the highest rate of opioid use in the country. Substance abuse cases in Letcher County are all referred to ARC. And again, the FBI is investigating ARC for healthcare fraud. What's interesting here, sources have told me, Elizabeth, and I'm going to get the attorney's take on this, that both Kevin Mullins, Judge Kevin Mullins and Sheriff Mickey Steins, that both of them are actually connected in a way to ARC. The CEO there, the founder, the owner, is a guy named Tim Robinson, and Tim Robinson has a right-hand man, a guy named Michael Clark, and Michael Clark knows both of them. So do we know anything about, beyond that, about a connection between Tim Robinson, the guy who runs and is now being investigated for healthcare fraud, aka stealing money? Do we know anything about the connection between him, his right-hand man, and this apparent relationship that the right-hand man has with both the judge and the sheriff?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So Michael Clark and I are both from the same town. So I have known him, or known of him, for a very long time. He got out of prison on his last trafficking charge. And so he had quite a history of drug trafficking charges. And he ended up working for ARC. I'm not sure what his official title was, But Tim Robinson here, the ARC CEO, just a little juicy tidbit. He is also an attorney by trade. So he's very knowledgeable about the laws and stuff. But Michael became some kind of a middleman for the court system here in Letcher County. And he was also a preacher, which Tim Robinson also became a preacher after he started ARC. And Michael Clark was pretty much based at the courthouse. He was there all the time. And he was responsible for getting the defendants their beds in rehab. So whenever someone would go in front of Judge Mullins, then I guess it was Michael's job to get an open bed for them. And then a lot of people were also driven to the rehab by the sheriff's department. So they were all very connected.
Yeah. General, to you and then to John on this. So this is getting a little complicated, and it shows you kind of the I guess the close knit nature of such a small community here. But so Mark, again, separately, you've got this big addiction recovery business in Kentucky now being investigated by the feds for healthcare fraud, aka again stealing money. Guy who runs that place, this guy here, Tim Robinson, you heard, former attorney, a preacher. Well, his right-hand man, again, is a guy named Michael Clark, who, as you heard, is also a preacher. I've learned that a lot of preachers in Kentucky, but I've learned that this guy, Michael Clark, was at the courthouse with Mickey Steins the day that Mickey Steins shot and killed Judge Mullins. And this guy, Clark, and Elizabeth, you can fill in the gaps here. He posted something on social media that has been like cached that people have seen, saying you're going to be absolutely shocked, something to the effect of you're going to be absolutely shocked when the truth comes out. It was later deleted from TikTok. Then TikTok deleted itself for a little while. That's a whole other story. But then he apparently left his ministry and got out of Dodge. He's no longer either in Letcher County and or Kentucky altogether. So, Mark, how does this complicate the matter that you've got this organization that was taking care of the people that Judge Mullins was putting away in recovery, now in the middle of this being investigated by the feds, and apparently someone from that organization connected very closely to the judge and the sheriff? Getting kind of crazy here.
Yeah, that's something that we see as well in our district and in other districts in West Tennessee, rural districts. It's not uncommon for a treatment provider to make itself available to the court to do this kind of service, to take in defendants who have substance abuse issues and need treatment. That's pretty common. And it actually, what you're seeing happen here in Letcher County is pretty typical. These recovery centers will put people in the courtroom and they will build these relationships with the judge, with the sheriff, with the state or the prosecution, and kind of position themselves as the go-to de facto substance abuse recovery option for the court. It can even get to the point where if you have what we call a recovery court, if the judge in this case had some type of drug court or recovery court or something that looked like that, he would employ somebody from ARC, probably in some capacity, to be a coordinator, possibly. So you develop these very tight relationships. And we had a sheriff get in trouble here in Tennessee who was doing something similar and was farming his inmates out to a related recovery center where they were being put to work. And the sheriff was charging them for being housed at the recovery center while he was also getting paid by the state of Tennessee because they're supposed to be in prison. And that's the allegation. I'm not saying that that's what was going on here in Letcher County, right, but it can lead to this opportunity for fraud or abuse. Not sure what the FBI is looking at. Don't know if the judge was involved in any kind of kickback scheme or anything like that. But when you have a business that kind of ingratiates itself into the court system and relies on the criminal defendants as its income, so to speak, you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, this is definitely getting more and more interesting for sure. From Mountain Woman, alleged ARC ripping off the government Medicare and Medicaid system, yet making major donations to governors and lieutenant governor campaigns. Dig deep. The obvious implications, maybe politicians are behind this, but we're on the level of trying to figure out here what happened with this judge. FBI is investigating the centers and the hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenues. You see there the COE putting that one up. But John, to you, this takes an interesting kind of plot twist with this. Now you've got this, because some of the allegations have been that the sheriff and or the judge were making, as you just heard General Mark say, making money off of criminal defendants who needed recovery help. So how does this sort of escalate the situation here? And if you're defending again, Sheriff Mickey Steins, what do you do with this information?
Well, first, it's kind of a leap to say that an FBI investigation into the CEO of ARC is somehow related to local grift or bribery.
I will. I'm sorry to interrupt,
right.
but I'll say that with a caveat that multiple sources telling us that they believe that that is the case. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Sure. Well, the FBI, that's not healthcare fraud. So I've defended a lot of healthcare fraud cases. Healthcare fraud is when the ARC provider is billing for services they don't actually provide. So they make up patients, they bill for 10 patients, they only see 2. They have dummy files for people who don't exist, or they bill for service A, which pays $1,000 for each time they do that, versus service B, which is what they actually gave the patient, but service B only pays $50. That's welfare fraud. Bribery is something that could be investigated at state level, and it's after the money comes from welfare and from Medicaid and Medicare into ARC. And then if the owner of ARC is taking that money and bribing officials to keep the contract or to get more people put in his beds, I don't really see anything unusual in the fact that, and we actually have a version of this here in Marion County and throughout the state of Indiana. Marion County Jail has a representative from the local public hospital's recovery program in the jail screening people for beds. They don't pay any of the judges and they don't pay the sheriff, but they have to speak to the judges to say this is an appropriate candidate or this is not an appropriate candidate, or here's how they're doing on their recovery, or they're not showing up for the recovery you ordered. So them being in the courtroom is not unusual at all. They're in the actual jail doing the screenings for eligibility and the insurance checks to see if they're covered to be able to get a bed. And they have to coordinate with the sheriff for those transports or for the releases. The sheriff will be ordered to hold that inmate for release until the drug recovery program can come over and escort them to the facility so they're not out on the street by themselves, which no one would want, with an order, a piece of paper saying go into drug treatment, and I hope you don't run into a drug dealer on the way. So the sheriff will transport them to that drug program. So those things, now, obviously, nobody's supposed to be taking kickbacks on that. Mm-hmm. If there's evidence of a kickback, that doesn't sound like a welfare fraud investigation.
Maybe I can clear that up a little bit.
Hop in.
Apparently, what they have been, what the allegations have been, is that once people leave the rehab, their insurance was continuing to be billed, or they were billing for one service and not providing it to their patients. So, and I listened to the podcast that I got yesterday, and in the podcast, it says that that ARC found an overpayment or an overcharge where they had overcharged somebody, and that they had self-reported that. And according to the podcast, that was kind of where this investigation kicked off at. It was a self-report.
Interesting, because that's some of the comments. What does the FBI say? They're not going to say anything. The FBI, the feds don't talk. Lee Miller here with a comment. If the FBI was involved, did they just leave it? Bro Smith here, Mark. It's like they're investigating themselves. Is it? I mean, if you now have the feds coming in to investigate what's going on. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah. And another part of this, which is it's just a mess. It is like a soap opera, somebody said on there. Tim Robinson actually went to law school with our Kentucky Attorney General. So that's why our Attorney General's office had to recuse themselves from the Medicaid fraud investigation, because they're all real good. They're college buddies. They're college roommates. And so that's why the AG's office is out of that. Now, the FBI, when they came out with this investigation and announced it, they've also got a form that they have requested anybody that has any knowledge, or if you feel like that you went through the ARC program and maybe you didn't get services that you were billed or whatever, they're asking anybody that has any information to fill out that form for the FBI.
By the way, if you guys out there watching this have any information, anything you want to share, and you want to do it anonymously or on the record, it is survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. This sounds like a story that definitely needs a spotlight shown on it. Linda Mon, Elizabeth's well-spoken. I'm proud to be a hillbilly because of her. I was calling her hillbilly on the last show, and I got a hate mail saying it was disrespectful, but I asked her, and she said it was okay. The COE and I were here, too, at one point on our honeymoon. I'm in Rwanda, lest you think this is not a global show. In Rwanda, you can go and hang with gorillas in the wild. It's pretty trip of a lifetime is all I can say. It was amazing. Couple things here. So, Mark, I was coming to you, and by the way, if you're appreciating this content and the investigative nature, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing a lot more shows on this, and we've got a Patreon page where you can support the channel further if you would like. And the COE puts all kinds of goodies in there. By the way, tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time, we've also been covering a very disturbing case out of both Miami, where I am, and New York City, about the Alexander brothers. They are 3 brothers from one family where there are just 4 brothers. So 3 of 4 charged with really heinous Sean Combs-like charges. And they are on their way, apparently, in a bus from Miami to New York City. They're going to be housed at the MDC Brooklyn Detention Center. This behavior goes all the way back to 2005, I believe. And tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Eastern, we have a victim who is coming on to tell us her story about these brothers who are in a load of trouble right now. By the way, the brothers were uber successful in the real estate business, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They put up $100 million plus bail per brother. The judge in Manhattan told them to get lost. They're sitting in confinement until the trial comes around. But so Mark, to you, what kind of protections, if anything, and then John, I'll have you weigh in on this, about, kind of self-investigation. So, some people here are saying, well, maybe in this state, the feds will be corrupt too. How do you prevent that?
Well, the feds are pretty well detached from the local operation of the court and the recovery. They're not involved in any of that. And to the same extent, similarly, so is the state attorney general's office. And they, in Tennessee, I guess like Kentucky, we do also have healthcare fraud, Medicaid fraud, investigators at both the state and the federal levels. And typically there's a pretty high level of confidence in those investigations just because they're not local. They're typically pretty well removed, both in physical distance and in legal and acting proximity to the program that might be under investigation. And then, usually you'll also have, or probably have in most recovery or drug courts, You're going to have grant money that typically will be involved in helping to fund the operation of those courts. That typically will involve grant oversight by the state or the feds. And then you typically have judicial oversight of the court itself. And we have some of these substance abuse providers that do great work for us in counties in our state. And they're necessary. You know, drug addiction is a real problem. I know in Appalachia, it's a huge problem. The opioid issue, methamphetamine, fentanyl, it's a terrible problem. So it's one that has to be addressed. We need treatment providers. And you just want it to be, you know, run in such a way that there's plenty of oversight. You don't have any issues that arise out of it. But sometimes they do arise. But in my opinion, folks should have a pretty high level of comfort in investigations by the AG or the FBI.
John, do you agree with Mark's assessment on that? Because again, I mean, obviously Kentucky, one of the 50 great states in the United States, and I don't know. There's people who are voicing concern that maybe the FBI. I'm not saying that this is any truth to it, but there are people right here saying, well, maybe they won't run a kosher investigation. What do you think?
Well, there are layers and layers of oversight, as the prosecuting attorney said, and it would be hard to imagine a conspiracy at all levels across all government and independent auditing and other agencies. But let's not forget, to pick up on your thread of, it's one of the 50 great United States. We're in the United States. There's shows like yours. There's the press. These are real people out in the community. You can't keep them from talking. They may not feel safe. They may want to go to a lawyer or seek protection. But when you're talking about the press being out there, wanting to talk to them, listening to them when they walk in, having a voice in the United States that they might not have anywhere else, and of course, the civil side of the law, where lawyers are after money, and if there is big fraud that is resulting in addicts not getting properly treated, they have civil claims. So all kinds of civil litigation that's well investigated and funded could happen. So I think not only because there's a lot of law enforcement and official oversight, but because we are in the United States, and those other two, the civil and the fourth estate, exist in a free society, we can be pretty sure that we'd hear about it if there's something that egregious.
I hope so. Look at this. This is, as my mom, Carm, would say, only in America. My mom is not from America. I grew up in Kentucky. I love being a hillbilly, and I was born in Iran. And we have the best food in Kentucky and Iran. There you go. An Iranian hillbilly on our show. Love that. I can't make this stuff up. And from He's a Doll, loving hillbilly. Who doesn't love hillbilly? But He's a Doll. I hope you don't get hate mail that you're calling her hillbilly and not Ms. Hillbilly or Hillbilly Crime. Sunny Days 55. Where are Kentucky journalists in this story? Elizabeth, is there much reporting on this case? It should stay in the limelight. I was going to say something, but sometimes I say things out loud that I shouldn't. So I'm going to hold off on what I was about to say. But what about that Hillbilly Crime? Also, there's a question about phone records with the sheriff from jail, I guess. Let's take this one first, because last time I forgot. So what about this one about Kentucky? Do you think, I know the paper of record in Letcher is the Mountain Eagle. Are they doing proper reporting on this?
Well, I guess, yeah, I should say yes. The Mountain Eagle has been there for decades, and they're just right down the street from the courthouse. So they have developed very good relationships with everyone in that circle. I don't know. The Eagle's been taking a lot of digs at me and my channel, so I didn't renew my subscription.
We're going to stay on top of that. And check out the reporting. You're going to do your reporting. We're going to do our reporting. There's a few more things I have to get to. Appreciate the best guest being here. Something else that is, someone was just asking about any phone records that you know of that have been released. And Super Planner, she is my new best friend. She's helping me plan things and put things together, because there's a lot of moving parts at SCS. But if you want to put on the list, we should reach out to Foya any kind of phone records from the jail where the sheriff is. But have you been able to get your hands on anything, Hillbilly Crime?
No, everybody's been asking me for the phone, any kind of jail recordings, but I haven't gotten any.
Okay. Before we move forward, one other thing. I understand, and again, I'll have the attorneys weigh in on this, but apparently, Elizabeth, Sheriff Steins had approached a personal injury attorney prior to all this. Do you know about this? And if so, do you have any idea what was behind that?
I don't. No, I don't have any information on that.
Yeah. So, General Mark, apparently, in some sort of relation to all this, there was a personal injury attorney who was approached by Sheriff Mickey Steins. What would be your best guess? I mean, my first thought was, well, maybe he thought he was going to be harmed in some way, so he's going. But I mean, why would you ever preemptively contact a personal injury attorney? Your thoughts on this?
I really have no idea. That seems really unusual to me, and kind of out there. The only reason I would contact a personal injury attorney is if I was injured, in a car wreck or big rig case or whatever the case may be. But hard for me to further a guess on that one.
Look at this. I'm getting yelled at, I think. Quack, quack, quack. Who else do you call by their channel name? Just curious, Joel. Yeah, Dr. G, I guess. Thanks, COE. She's got my back there. John, your thoughts on this? I mean, I'm stumped on that one, that apparently he was in communication with a personal injury attorney. Maybe it was just for general legal advice, and he just happened to go to a personal injury attorney who maybe he knew. I have no idea.
Well, that would be kind of my guess. I don't know how many. So think about it. We've already talked about what a small county it is. And when you have a small county, you have an even smaller number of attorneys. And then you start taking attorneys out of that equation by saying the county attorney, the city attorney, all the judges, the prosecuting attorney. So those are people that the sheriff's not going to go talk to. The local prominent criminal defense attorney probably represents a lot of people that are in his jail. So he might not want to go talk to that guy. Let's take him off the table. But he feels like he needs legal advice, maybe not about a personal injury, maybe about a wrongful termination or some other civil claim, or maybe just general legal advice. And how many attorneys are there available after you take all those other ones off the table in a small county?
Yeah.
Might be that simple.
By the way, I admittedly sort of buried the lead in some of the important information because we're still vetting this, but there are certain things I'm going to bring up that need further vetting, but some of them I'm comfortable enough because enough people have kind of pointed me in the right direction. And I spoke off camera briefly, just so you guys know, to Hillbilly Crime about this. But for the three panelists, another judge's name is being mentioned in connection with all of this. And this is a family judge named Daniel Dotson. Do we know, Elizabeth, his connection? Because from what I'm being told, there is one between this family judge and the sheriff and or the judge.
He is a lot less known as a family judge, and he's more known as one of the highest priced defense attorneys in Whitesburg. So he is the one that.
So he has a dual. He has a dual role. He's a defense attorney and a family court judge.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So what do we know about him? This is Judge Daniel Dotson.
Well, if you are charged with serious charges, that's who most people want as their attorney. Very high priced, very good connections.
And his reputation, good, bad, you don't want to say.
Well, he's got two completely different reputations. He's got one personal reputation, and then he's got a professional reputation.
Mark, I don't want to throw you into the hornet's nest here, but multiple people telling me that this guy is potentially a key player in the story. You just heard well-off criminal defense attorney, also a family judge, again, the web, Alec Murdoch, they said, what a tangled web we weave. And that is certainly true here. What would need to be done with this family judge / powerhouse criminal defense attorney, who people are talking about in connection with this case, about, a possible connection? Who should be investigating this?
Well, if he's got any connection with the perpetrator, I would imagine the Kentucky State Police, who kind of jumped into this investigation from the get-go, along with the AG's office acting as the prosecuting attorney's office. So I would think the Kentucky State Police would be looking at any connection that this other judge / defense attorney might have with the parties in this case, and whether or not there's any relevant evidence that he's involved in any way. So that would be kind of my take on that. It does kind of go along with what John said. In these small communities and rural communities, you do have fewer attorneys. You have people who wear different hats. You will have maybe a defense lawyer who is a part-time judge. And you might have a personal injury lawyer who has to do other things, just be kind of a general practitioner because of the size of the community. So that could explain some of this.
Yeah, I want to be clear about this, Judge Daniel Dotson. In no way am I implicating him, and no idea if he's connected, but sources close to this have kind of pointed him out, multiple sources, as a person to look out for, as possibly being connected to this on another level. So he is not someone who's been implicated, not someone who's being investigated. He is just somebody who's an interesting character, I suppose, in this crazy tangled web of a story. Now, some of the other sources, again, this is kind of the real meat and potatoes of this whole hour and 21 minutes. And you see here, and she is brave, Elizabeth, for coming on, because, again, it is a small community. But sources also tell me that while Sheriff Mickey Steins and Judge Mullins were extremely close, that they were not good friends, that they weren't really friends, but they were extremely close, and that they were potentially working in concert. So put together that as you will, but that is what people are saying. So, why was there this relationship? The final one, I'm just going to hold off on, because I think it's a little too, I want to vet it out a little bit more. But it relates back to Judge Mullins and ARC, and some pressure that he was allegedly putting on Mickey Stein. So a lot of this is becoming a little less blurry, but it is still somewhat blurry. Just Emily says, despite attitudes for Kentucky, a lot of rural areas, hillbillies, Kentucky State Police are extremely efficient, and I have no doubt about that at all. And same with the FBI. A final thing that is the two final things. And let me go to you on this, Hillbilly Crime. There was this civil lawsuit. I mean, we had Ned Pillersdorf on. And this is where Mickey Steins, what he was deposed for 3 days before the killing. Well, the judge was never sued. The judge was never deposed, but some of the testimony points to the judge, specifically Sabrina Atkins. She said she's one of the victims that she thought she saw, which is hearsay, but she thought she saw video of the judge involved in some of this. So let me actually pose this to John Tompkins. So, John, to you, there's a civil suit. There's a deposition that happens 3 days before. Apparently, it gets very heated. One of the people who is filing the suit, the other one dies of an overdose, Jennifer Hill. The other woman, Sabrina Atkins, Adkins, claims she saw Judge Mullins engaging in lewd behavior in the chamber. So why would there not have been some sort of complaint filed against the judge based on that revelation by someone in the lawsuit?
Well, I think, one, because you want to substantiate the accusation before you come out and start filing complaints against judges. Hey, I think I saw something has red flags all over it before you go file a complaint. You might call somebody and say, we need someone else to investigate this. I don't have the resources in my attorney's office to look into this. I'm not the right person to investigate this, but this is what we heard. You have to consider the source of the information, how reliable they are, and you have to have some basis to file an actual complaint as opposed to referring it for further investigation, which I think should be done as soon as possible, both to see if there's anything there and also to get rid of the allegation if there's nothing there. That's the other side of all investigations. They clear people. So why wouldn't you go directly to the step of filing a complaint either with the judicial board or some other agency? Well, you want to make sure that you have more than just, I think I saw a video of something that was improper.
Yeah. By the way, John, have you ever faced threats for defending certain clients?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
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 Interesting.
And this goes back to, the defense attorney reputation in town. I can tell you with certainty every time I walk into a major felony trial, particularly homicides or batteries where there's injuries, half the courtroom loves me and is cheering for me, and half the courtroom hates me and hopes I don't make it to the elevator.
It sounds like me as a host of Surviving the Survivor. Same kind of reception. One final thing here, and then we'll get closing thoughts. This goes to the lawsuit. So the deposition was over this case where Ben Fields, a deputy in Letcher County, was convicted of the R word. And then the two women who brought the case, again, one has passed away. The other is Sabrina Atkins. But Jennifer Hill, who allegedly died of an overdose, when she filed this lawsuit, in the lawsuit, it states, Mark, that her boyfriend at the time, a guy named Billy Adams, went and tried to report the R to the department, to the Letcher County Sheriff's Office. And she was told by someone named Officer Norris. He was told, I should say, the boyfriend was told by someone named Officer Norris to keep quiet about it, and that he would check into it. That same day, a second officer pulls over Billy Adams, the boyfriend of the now deceased victim number 2. He was warned to keep his mouth shut. And then a third time he's pulled over that day, threatened by multiple police officers, according to the lawsuit, to keep quiet if he knew what was good for him. I hate to end on this sort of note before we get final thoughts, but this again is in a public lawsuit going to show the incestuous nature of this town. I mean, you've got deputies covering for deputies, covering for potentially judges, covering for potentially who knows what else. I guess let's get your final thoughts here and your reaction to this. This is General Mark Davidson, an active district attorney in rural Tennessee. Go ahead, Mark.
So that kind of allegation kind of highlights the difficulty in having an agency investigate itself or its own members, especially in a rural community or a small community. If you got a sheriff's department with few resources, a small department, all the officers are going to know each other very, very well. And that just makes it really hard to go report to that same department that one of their own is engaged in some wrongdoing. And so that's the allegation that we're hearing in this civil lawsuit. I'm not going to weigh in on how accurate that was or if it was true or not true. But the allegation itself clearly would tend, I think, to show that other deputies were in on this, knew about this bad behavior. The sheriff himself must have known about this bad behavior, and that's why we're suing him. He's not properly training his people. He's not properly monitoring his folks. And in fact, they're actively trying to sweep aside these allegations of misconduct. So that seems to me to be the purpose of that allegation in the lawsuit without really trying to weigh in on how truthful it was. But we would ask another department to look into those kind of allegations, not the sheriff's department itself.
which makes sense. Shout out to my friends K9 Catherine, friends of the show, Ned Smith, Kathy Barella, Ella Nader, who's coming to us, I think from Slovenia, Linda Mon, and the list goes on here. Ida Shaw, of course, happy to be here as ever. John Tompkins is a very savvy criminal defense attorney out of the great state of Indiana, but he's worked in smaller jurisdictions. I don't know what else to call this, John, other than a huge incestuous mess in rural Kentucky with a lot of tentacles. I mean, we're going to stay on it. And again, anybody who wants to be a source anonymously or reveal information, whether you want to do it anonymously or on the record, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. I realize how hard it is for people to come forward on stories like this, but it sounds like there's some change that needs to come to this part of rural Kentucky. So with that said, John, your final thoughts on this crazy, wild, tangled web of a story.
Well, I'm going to start with what I said in a previous episode that you had me on. You know, homicides are generally love, money, drugs, or serial killer. And so I think we're going to see some kind, and we're already hearing about love. He was not in his home anymore. So breakup, and we're hearing about drugs, the ARC program and treatment. I think every case is unique, but there are patterns that repeat. And I think these are going to be some of the more interesting patterns. And because it's a small county, there will probably be more overlapping patterns in this case, making it even more interesting. And I do understand, and Hillbilly, you may appreciate this. My dad was born in Vinnie, Kentucky, a town so small that they covered it with a lake. Close to Somerset, they moved all the records there. So I certainly get what you're saying about small communities and small towns. But again, I think this is going to be a very interesting fact pattern. I look at some of the indications that this may not be a murder homicide, but some kind of lesser homicide that has all of these other factors. These incestuous relationships, as you said, playing into it, and maybe some bribes coming from the treatment program. Hope not, because those are important programs to run correctly. But they also, when they go wrong, leave a lot of people with a lot to lose and these kinds of consequences sometimes. And if I may, just on a different topic, let you know, Josh, huge filings in the Delphi case today, and that's why I was late getting on your show.
Oh, no worries. Everyone calls me Josh. It's Joel. No worries. Didn't take it
Joel, I
personally.
apologize. I have the wrong name under
for some reason, everyone does that. I don't know why, Joel and Josh. But thank you for that. So finally, of course, we got Elizabeth Jones. The YouTube channel she runs is Hillbilly Crime. She's really been on top of this story. Hopefully, we're going to continue to collaborate with her on this one. Ned Smith says, excellent panel. Please be careful, Elizabeth. I hope you have a mean dog. That's a very Ned Smith kind of thing to say, but most important thing is your safety, being careful. So always want you to just provide the information that you feel comfortable with, but your final thoughts before we say goodbye.
Okay, thank you. I just want to piggyback on the pattern thing. Thank you for bringing that up. I want to point out that there is a big pattern that we've seen with sex offenses, criminal sexual offenses in Letcher County. One of the things that we've seen is our prosecutors going in, prosecuting their friends or people who maybe business owners, high profile people in our community for sex crimes that they don't have any punishment. So our prosecutors are going in pretty much acting like the defense attorneys. We had one man that was indicted on 44 counts of committing sexual abuse to one child under 12 and one child under 16. And the prosecutor recommended a special sentencing for him to serve 5 years on house arrest and work release. And that's not the only case. We've had several different cases such as that. So I think the sexual immorality in Letcher County just kind of goes beyond the criminal defendants, even into our courthouse. And this is a perfect case to shine a light on some of those patterns.
I froze up on my end there. One last tech issue. It wouldn't be STS if we didn't have a final tech glitch, but I caught pretty much everything you said there, Elizabeth. So thank you. We'll get back to this Delphi filings. I'll have John. We'll text about that, and then I'll let you guys know via Twitter at Podcast STS, Instagram at Surviving the Survivor COE. We need to check this router. Huge thanks to all the best guests. Love you, America. Love you, Tennessee, Indiana, of course, Letcher County, Kentucky, and we cannot forget Rwanda and Estonia. Gritty Gret, you better get to Miami, where it's about 82 degrees today. So, and sunny. Come on down. We will see you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time. You got a victim of the Alexander brothers' depraved behavior. She is coming on to tell her story tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time. We will see you then.